City. A little bit dangerous for the World Cup or for the Olympics, where they have Olympic overthrow, right?
With all due respect to current world leaders, football is bigger than them, and football will survive their regime, their government, their slogans.
There is a question that nobody in football quite expected to be asking this close to a World Cup. Who actually controls this tournament? It seems like it should have an obvious answer. FIFA runs the World Cup. FIFA always has. The host nations provide the infrastructure, the stadiums, the security, the logistics. But the sporting decisions, the scheduling, the venues, the participating teams, that all belongs to FIFA. That's been the arrangement since the tournament began in 1930. But right now, in the weeks leading up to the most ambitious World Cup in history, that question is being tested in a way it has never been tested before, because the President of the United States, the country hosting the majority of the 104 matches, has made 3 separate attempts to reshape this tournament to his preferences, and on every single occasion, FIFA has pushed back. He threatened to strip matches from cities he called unsafe, including Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Boston. FIFA reminded him who holds the contracts. His special envoy proposed replacing a qualified nation, Iran, with an unqualified one, Italy, as a diplomatic favor. FIFA pointed to their own regulations and essentially said no. And all of this is playing out against the backdrop of a relationship between the US president and the FIFA president that has been described as unusually close, which makes every moment of friction between the two organizations even more fascinating to watch. So what exactly happened? How did FIFA respond each time? And what does this extraordinary behind-the-scenes tension mean for the tournament that kicks off in less than 5 weeks? Let's walk through it, all 3 episodes, because the full picture is far more interesting than any single headline. Let's start with the moment the whole thing began. Late September 2025, 7 months before the opening kickoff. Speaking to reporters, Donald Trump raised the possibility that he might move World Cup matches away from certain American cities if he considered them unsafe. He mentioned cities by name: Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and later Boston. His reasoning was tied to his political assessments of the local governments running those cities, several of which are governed by Democratic mayors. His exact words when asked about the situation were direct. If I think it's not safe, we're going to move it out of that city. He even went further, suggesting the process would be straightforward, that he'd simply call Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, explain the situation, and Infantino would agree to make the move. He wouldn't love to do it, but he'd do it very easily. That description of the FIFA president as someone who would defer to the US president on venue decisions set off alarm bells across the football world, and the response from FIFA came quickly. Victor Montagliani, FIFA's vice president, a Canadian, and the head of CONCACAF, addressed reporters at a sports business conference in London just days later. His response was one of the most memorable lines to come out of any football governance discussion in recent years. It's FIFA's tournament, FIFA's jurisdiction. FIFA makes those decisions. And then he went further. With all due respect to current world leaders, football is bigger than them, and football will survive their regime and their government and their slogans. That's the beauty of our game. It is bigger than any individual and bigger than any country. In the context of a football governance dispute, that is an extraordinary statement. The vice president of FIFA was essentially telling the sitting president of the United States in public that he did not have the authority to rearrange the World Cup schedule for political reasons. Here's where things get interesting, because FIFA's response didn't end there. It evolved, and that evolution tells its own story. After Montagliani's firm pushback, FIFA issued a separate, more measured statement. The language shifted. Rather than maintaining the hard line, the new statement said that safety and security were top priorities at all FIFA events, that governments were responsible for those decisions, and that FIFA hoped every one of our 16 host cities would be ready to successfully host and fulfill all necessary requirements. Football analysis and legal experts noticed a change immediately. The initial statement was a wall. The second was a door, slightly open. What it revealed is the complexity of FIFA's actual position. On one hand, the organization is contractually bound to its host cities. Every city that was awarded matches signed a host city agreement directly with FIFA. Those contracts include strong protections against unilateral relocation. Legal experts who reviewed the framework noted that relocating matches based on political preferences rather than documented safety failures or contractual breaches would almost certainly expose FIFA to significant legal liability from affected cities. Boston's mayor at the time was direct about it. Everything was locked down by contract, she said. No single person, even one who lives in the White House, could simply undo those agreements. But here's the bigger issue. Trump couldn't legally force FIFA to move matches. What he could potentially do is create conditions through federal resource allocation, security prioritization, and administrative friction that made it harder for certain cities to demonstrate full compliance with FIFA's requirements. And that's a pressure point FIFA can't entirely ignore, given that the federal government ultimately controls the resources that make a major security operation like the World Cup possible. This is the tension at the heart of the story. FIFA holds the contracts, the US government holds a lot of the practical keys, and the relationship between those two things is not as clean as either side wants to pretend. Now, let's talk about the second episode, because this one is even more extraordinary from a football perspective. In late April 2026, just weeks before the tournament was due to begin, a story broke in the Financial Times that genuinely stunned the football world. Paolo Zampoli, the U.S. Special Envoy to Global Affairs, an Italian-American close to the Trump administration, confirmed publicly that he had personally suggested to both Donald Trump and Gianni Infantino that Iran should be removed from the 2026 World Cup and replaced by Italy. His reasoning was personal and sentimental. He was Italian by birth, he said, and it would be a dream to see the Azzurri at a U.S.-hosted tournament. He pointed to Italy's 4 World Cup titles as justification for their inclusion. There are several things that make this story remarkable. Italy had not qualified for the 2026 World Cup. In fact, they had just failed to qualify for the 3rd consecutive time, losing a playoff final against Bosnia and Herzegovina on penalties. Italy missing 3 straight World Cups is already one of the most significant declines in international football history. To suggest they should simply be handed a place because of diplomatic convenience, that suggestion came from a U.S. government envoy to both the President of the United States and the President of FIFA. The reaction was fast, and it came from multiple directions simultaneously. FIFA, staying consistent with the position they'd held since the whole Iran participation question began, responded by pointing to Infantino's public statement the previous week. The Iranian team is coming, for sure. Infantino had personally visited the Iranian squad's training camp in Turkey the month before and posed for photos with the players. His message was unmistakable. Iran had qualified, Iran would play. Sports should be outside politics. Italy's own sports minister, Andrea Abodi, dismissed the suggestion immediately. It is not appropriate, he said. You qualify on the pitch. The Italian economy minister went further, calling the concept shameful. Even leading Italian coaches publicly rejected the idea, saying Italy doesn't need Trump's support on something like this. And the Iranian embassy in Rome weighed in as well, saying the proposal demonstrated what they called the moral bankruptcy of the United States, and that Italy did not need political privileges to prove its footballing greatness. This episode was rejected by FIFA, by Italy, by Iran, and effectively by everyone except the man who proposed it. But the fact that it was proposed at all, at the level of a U.S. government envoy, explicitly confirmed to the international press, speaks to a broader pattern. This was not the first time Zampoli has tried this. He made an identical suggestion ahead of the 2022 Qatar World Cup, when he was a UN ambassador. FIFA ignored it then too. What makes all of this so significant for football fans isn't just the political drama. It's what these episodes reveal about a power struggle that runs directly through the heart of the 2026 tournament. FIFA and the Trump administration are in many ways genuine partners on this World Cup. In March 2025, a White House task force was created specifically for the tournament. Infantino attended the ceremony in the Oval Office. In December 2025, Infantino handed Trump the FIFA Peace Prize and described the tournament as simply the greatest event that mankind has ever seen and will ever see. Trump was awarded the Peace Prize and attended the FIFA Club World Cup alongside Infantino that same summer. That relationship, publicly warm and publicly mutual, is the background against which all three of these interference attempts happened, which is precisely why makes FIFA's refusals so significant. When two organizations that have gone out of their way to present a unified front find themselves publicly at odds over who controls venue selection and team participation, something real is being contested. And the football world has noticed. European football associations, already agitated by the trajectory of the 2026 tournament, have become increasingly vocal about governance concerns. UEFA members made their displeasure known at the FIFA Congress. Fan groups across the world are paying attention not just to match schedules and ticket prices, but to the question of whether FIFA's independence from political interference, which has always been the organization's stated core principle, actually means anything when the host country's leader wants something changed. So, what does all of this mean for the players, the teams, and the fans heading to North America this summer? For the players, the most direct consequence is the uncertainty hanging over Iran's situation. Their players trained through all of this. They qualified. They went to Turkey for preparation. Infantino personally visited them. And yet, right up until the moment they board their flights to the United States, there is a layer of uncertainty around their participation that no other qualified team is carrying. That is an extraordinary psychological burden for a group of professional footballers who have done everything they were supposed to do on the pitch. For the teams in Iran's group, Qatar, Venezuela, and the United States, the scheduling uncertainty, however small, creates planning complications that simply shouldn't exist at this stage of preparation. For fans, the host city saga has had real consequences. Supporters who bought tickets for matches in Seattle and San Francisco, cities that were publicly named by the U.S. president as potentially unsafe, faced months of uncertainty about whether those matches would actually take place. That uncertainty, for fans who had already spent money on flights and accommodation, is the kind of thing that damages trust in a tournament's commercial promises for years after the fact. The matches are still scheduled to take place in those cities, the contracts held, but the noise around it created a climate of hesitation that contributed to the broader travel slowdown the hospitality industry has been reporting. Here's the bigger picture, and it's an important one. FIFA has maintained a core position throughout all of this. Sport should be outside politics. It's a phrase Infantino has used repeatedly in the context of Iran's participation specifically. And on the two most concrete interference attempts, the venue threats and the Iran-Italy swap proposal, FIFA did hold that line. The cities kept their matches. Iran's participation was confirmed. The regulations were respected. But holding the line while simultaneously cultivating a close personal and institutional relationship with the administration pushing against it is a complicated balance, and it's one FIFA has navigated imperfectly. The softening of the venue statement after Montagliani's initial firmness suggested internal tension about how hard to push back. The fact that Infantino's response to the Iran-Italy proposal came through pre-existing comments rather than a direct rebuttal suggested a preference for avoiding confrontation wherever possible. What football fans around the world are watching is an organization trying to stage its most ambitious tournament ever, while managing an unprecedented level of political noise from the country hosting most of it. So far, the fundamental sporting decisions have held. The qualified teams are in. The contracted cities have their matches. The regulations have been respected. Whether that holds through June 11th and all the way to the final on July 19th is a question nobody can answer with certainty right now. But FIFA has drawn its lines, and the world of football is watching to see whether they hold. I want to know what you think about all this. When a sitting U.S. president publicly suggests rearranging a World Cup schedule for political reasons, and when a government envoy proposes handing a spot in the tournament to an unqualified nation, does that change how you see the integrity of the tournament? Or do you think FIFA handled it well by holding their ground? And what's your prediction? Do you think any of these pressure points actually affect what happens on the pitch between June and July? Drop your answer in the comments below. This is exactly the kind of conversation this channel exists to have. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel reach more football fans who follow this sport beyond the 90 minutes. And subscribe if you haven't already, because there's a lot more of this story still to come before that opening whistle. This story is still developing, and as always, football never stays quiet for long. See you in the next one.